Have you ever noticed how easy it is to tell people everything that's going on in your life? You share when you're struggling, when you've been hurt, when you're trying to change. And in that moment, it feels harmless, maybe even healing. You think you're letting go of the weight, releasing the burden. But here's the truth most people never realize. Every time you repeat that story, you're not releasing it. You're reinforcing it. You're stitching that pain into your identity. You're taking an old wound and scratching it again and again until it scars so deep it becomes who you think you are. Think about it. How many times have you heard someone tell the same story over and over? The heartbreak that broke them 10 years ago. The job that never appreciated them. The betrayal they can't let go of. At first, you feel sympathy, but after a while, you realize they've become that story. They don't live outside of it anymore. It defines them. And maybe, just maybe, you're doing the same thing to yourself without even knowing it. Not everyone needs to know what you're going through. Not everyone has the depth to understand it. And more importantly, not everyone deserves access to the most fragile parts of your soul. Yet we hand them over so easily in conversations, in late-night confessions, or worse, in endless social media posts. But here's the problem. When your pain becomes your script, the world begins to play along. Friends start to see you as the one who's always hurt. Colleagues see you as the one who's always struggling. Even you start to believe that's all you are. Let me ask you this. Are you talking about change more than you're actually changing? Because there's a huge difference between the two. Talking feels good in the moment it gives you a sense of release, but it's only temporary relief. It's like scratching that itch. It feels good for a second, but it leaves the wound open. Real healing doesn't come from constant talking. It comes from silence. From the moments you sit with yourself, reflect, and start slowly rebuilding. It's not glamorous. It's not loud, but it's real. The Stoic philosophers understood this centuries ago. Marcus Aurelius, one of the most powerful men in history, didn't write his thoughts to announce them to the world. He wrote privately, to remind himself, to guide his own growth. Epictetus didn't waste time repeating his wounds. He taught that what matters is not the pain itself, but how we choose to respond to it. Silence is not weakness. It's strategy. It's discipline. It's the refusal to let your wounds become your personality. And think about the people you respect most. Is it the ones who constantly broadcast their problems, or the ones who move quietly, with strength, letting their actions and their presence speak louder than their words? We admire the person who speaks less but lives more. The person who doesn't need to shout their growth, because you can feel it the moment they walk into a room. So, as you listen to this message, I want you to reflect on your own life. Are you sharing your struggles with anyone who will listen? Are you turning your hardships into an identity you can't escape? Or are you ready to break that cycle, ready to practice the art of silence and let your actions prove who you are becoming? Because silence, when practiced with intention, is not fear, it is strength. And if you want to evolve, if you want to grow into the person you were meant to be, it begins with one powerful decision. Stop narrating every wound. Start living with quiet discipline. And let the world see your transformation, not because you spoke it into existence, but because you embodied it. Stay with me for the next few minutes, because what I'm about to share might change the way you think about your pain forever. You may not realize it, but the way you talk about your struggles could be the very reason you're stuck in them. Have you ever noticed how some people can't stop talking about what hurt them? It's the same story, told 100 different times. The breakup that shattered them, the betrayal they never expected, the job that didn't value them. At first, you listen out of compassion, but over time, you realize they're not just telling a story, they're living inside it. And here's the part we often miss. Every time you repeat that pain, your brain doesn't see it as just a memory. It encodes it as part of who you are. Not something that happened to you, something you are. Your mind is a pattern-seeking machine. What you repeat, it turns into identity. So the more you speak about your suffering, the more you become the one who suffers. Think of it like scratching a wound. At first, it's just an itch, but if you keep going, you leave a scar that never really fades. We do the exact same thing with emotional wounds, except we don't scratch them with our hands. We scratch them with our words. Maybe you've seen this in your own life. You go through something painful, and the first time you share it, it feels like relief. The second time, still a release. But by the 10th time, you're no longer just sharing, you're rehearsing. You're practicing the role of the victim. And before long, it feels impossible to play any other part. The Stoics understood this danger long before modern psychology had the words for it. They believed speech was sacred, something to be used with precision, not wasted on rehearsing wounds. Marcus Aurelius didn't write page after page about how life had hurt him. He wrote about how to rise above, how to discipline the mind, how to keep himself anchored. Epictetus, who was once a slave, didn't dwell endlessly on the pain of his chains. He focused on what could never be chained: his response, his discipline, his inner freedom. And maybe that's the question we need to ask ourselves. Are we speaking to heal, or are we speaking to bleed? Because those are two very different things. Relief is not the same as healing. But healing requires silence, reflection, and the slow restructuring of your inner world. Think about the last time you went through something hard. Did talking about it actually bring you closer to peace, or did it just make the wound feel fresh again? Sometimes we confuse noise for progress. We think that if enough people know about our pain, it will somehow dissolve. It dissolves when we stop feeding it energy. I'll share something personal. There was a time when I couldn't stop talking about a betrayal I experienced. I brought it up with friends, with family, even with people who barely knew me. And yes, it felt good in the moment. But weeks later, I realized nothing had changed. I was still stuck, still angry, still broken. The only thing that grew stronger was the identity of being the betrayed one. And that identity was eating me alive. It wasn't until I sat in silence, journaled, reflected, faced my pain without needing to perform it, that I began to heal. That's when I understood the Stoic truth. Silence isn't weakness, it's strength. It's the act of saying, I refuse to let this story define me any longer. So ask yourself, what stories are you repeating? What wounds are you scratching every time you tell the tale again? And more importantly, are you willing to try something different? To stop narrating the same ending and give yourself the chance to write a new chapter? Because healing doesn't begin with more words. It begins with fewer, not with retelling, not with performance, but with presence. And the moment you choose silence, not suppression, but conscious silence, you take back control. You stop being the victim of your story, and you start becoming the author of your future. And this is only the beginning. Because once you understand how silence stops pain from defining you, the next step is learning how silence can actually rebuild you. Stay with me, because in the next part, you'll see why the strongest changes always happen in the quiet. But there's still a hidden trap you need to avoid, one that silently robs people of their progress every single day. It's the habit of talking about your goals before you've even started. And as strange as it sounds, just saying it out loud can actually trick your brain into believing you've already achieved it. In the next part, we're going to break down this danger and why keeping your goals quiet might be the smartest move you ever make. Have you ever noticed how good it feels to talk about your goals before you've even started? You tell a friend, I'm finally going to get in shape. Or you announce on social media, this year I'm going to wake up at 5 a.m. and change my life. And for a moment, it feels exciting. You get that rush of motivation, maybe even a few encouraging comments, and you start to believe the change has already begun. But here's the trap: your brain doesn't know the difference. Studies have shown that when you talk about something you plan to do, your brain releases the same chemical reward, dopamine, as if you had already done it. You get the satisfaction without the effort. The celebration happens before the work even begins. And that's why so many people never follow through. Every time they announce their goals too early, they drain the very energy needed to achieve them. They confuse words with progress. They think momentum is building, when in reality, it's leaking away. Think of it like popping champagne at the base of the mountain. You're celebrating the climb, but you haven't taken a single step. And when the excitement fades, you're left standing there, wondering why the summit still feels so far away. How many times have you done this yourself? Maybe you told someone, I'm going to start writing every morning, or I'm going to save money, cut out debt, and finally get ahead. But because you spoke it too soon, you tricked yourself into believing you were already moving forward. And then, nothing changed. The Stoics warned us about this long ago. They believed that progress narrated too early becomes diluted. It turns into noise, and noise clouds clarity. That's why Marcus Aurelius wrote privately, not publicly because his growth didn't need to be performed, it needed to be lived. That's why Epictetus reminded his students that discipline isn't for show, it's for the soul. So here's the question worth asking. Are you talking about your growth more than you're actually growing? Because if you are, you may be feeding the illusion of progress instead of building the real thing. The truth is, growth doesn't need a microphone. It needs repetition. It needs discipline in the moments no one sees. It needs the kind of silence that protects your energy instead of wasting it on applause. I'll give you an example. I once knew someone who kept announcing his new habits. One week, it was cold showers. The next, intermittent fasting. The week after, journaling. Each time, he made a post, explained his plan, even encouraged others to join. But a month later, nothing had stuck. Why? Because every announcement gave him the dopamine hit he craved, and after that, the work felt less urgent. Contrast that with another friend of mine. He never told a soul what he was working on. No updates, no declarations. But after 6 months, you could feel the difference. He was calmer, more patient, stronger in how he carried himself. And when I finally asked, he just smiled and said, I've been practicing discipline every day. This is the power of silent growth. When your transformation doesn't rely on being seen, it becomes permanent. When your progress is protected from the noise, so next time you feel the urge to announce your new goal, pause. Ask yourself, do I need to say this or do I need to do it? Am I seeking commitment or applause? Because they are not the same. If it's real, it can wait. If it's true, it doesn't need to be declared. There's dignity in quiet transformation, strength in being unbothered by the need to explain. And here's the ultimate Stoic lesson. When change is real, you don't have to talk about it. People will notice. More importantly, you will notice. Not in the noise of your words, but in the clarity of your actions. And this leads us to another danger most people fall into, repeating the old story so many times that they stay trapped inside it. In the next part, we'll uncover why reliving the past through words keeps you chained to it, and how silence can finally set you free. Have you ever met someone who can't stop telling the same story over and over again? It doesn't matter if it's a party, a dinner, or just a casual conversation. Somehow, they always find a way to bring up that job that never valued them, that relationship that ended unfairly, or that betrayal they still can't forgive. At first, you feel compassion, but after a while, you realize something important. They're not just telling the story, they're living inside it. The past has ended, but they haven't left it behind. And here's the danger most people don't see. Every time you retell the same story, it stops being just a memory and it becomes an identity. Instead of saying, that happened to me once, you start saying, this is who I am. We all carry these inner scripts. Sometimes they're loud, sometimes quiet. They sound like this. I always mess things up. I'm not the kind of person who gets ahead. I'll never be good at relationships. And the more you repeat them, whether out loud or in your own mind, the tighter those chains become. It's like acting in a play where the stage has changed, the audience has changed, but you keep playing the same defeated character. You don't realize that the world has moved on, because in your head, the script hasn't. The Stoics understood this trap. Epictetus said, it's not things that disturb us, but our judgments about them. If you keep judging yourself by old stories, you never get to write a new one. It's not the event that keeps you stuck, it's the way you keep rehearsing it. Let me give you an example. I once knew a man who, every time we met, would retell the story of how his boss overlooked him for a promotion. 10 years had passed, but he was still wearing that same wound. It had become his entire identity, the man who was never recognized. The sad part? His current life was better. He had a new job, more opportunities, more freedom. But none of it mattered because he was still starring in the old script. And maybe you've done this too. Maybe you've caught yourself saying, "I'm always unlucky," or "people like me don't succeed." And each time you say it, you press play on that old tape again. Not because it's true, but because you've convinced yourself it is. But here's the Stoic alternative. Stop feeding the story. Stop scratching the wound. Stop saying the things you no longer want to live. Imagine holding a pen in your hand. You can either keep rereading the first page of your life, or you can turn to the next blank one and begin again. Healing doesn't happen when you repeat the old dialogue. And that's the real power of restraint. Not hiding, not denying, but refusing to rehearse the story that no longer serves you. Because the moment you stop telling it, you begin to break free from it. So I'll ask you this. What story are you still telling that belongs to your past? And what would happen if you stopped? What if you gave yourself permission to walk off the old stage, to leave behind the character who suffered, and step into the role of someone stronger, calmer, freer? Because silence here is not weakness, it's clarity. It's the quiet decision to stop defending the past and start living the present. And this leads us to another powerful truth. If your growth is real, it doesn't need to be proven to anyone else. In the next part, we'll explore why the strongest transformation is the one you do for yourself, without applause, without validation, and without needing the world to know. Here's a hard question, one that might sting a little. If no one ever praised you for changing, would you still do it? That single question cuts deeper than most people are ready for, because it reveals whether your growth is genuine or just a performance for approval. In a world obsessed with being seen, with proving and posting, silent growth almost feels foreign. But the truth is, your most powerful transformation doesn't happen in the spotlight. It happens in the quiet, when no one's clapping, when no one even knows what you're working on. Real change doesn't crave attention. It doesn't need to be broadcast or measured by likes. It just needs to be true. Think about this. How many times have you seen people announce their new life online? Day one of my journey, only to quit 2 weeks later? That wasn't transformation. That was performance. And performance fades the moment the audience looks away. But the changes you make for yourself, without needing validation, those are the ones that last. I once knew a man who lost everything in a messy divorce. He didn't post about his healing. He didn't make grand declarations. Quietly, privately, he rebuilt. He started boxing not to show off his strength, but to feel it return. He cooked not for Instagram photos, but to ground himself in the present. He read philosophy not to quote it, but to rediscover how to think clearly again. 6 months later, everyone noticed not because he told them, but because his presence had shifted. He was calmer, stronger, more centered. It wasn't the boxing gloves, the recipes, or the quotes. It was the unshakable energy that comes when you rebuild for no one but yourself. That's the power of self-directed change. It doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for recognition. It carries a stillness that others can feel. And here's why this matters. When you stop needing applause, your actions stop being hollow gestures and start becoming real habits. You're not trying to prove anything, you're simply realigning with yourself. The Stoics understood this deeply. Marcus Aurelius wrote his private journals not for readers, not for legacy, but to remind himself to live with discipline. He didn't need to convince anyone of his growth. His life reflected it. Epictetus didn't ask for permission to live with integrity. He chose it silently, because virtue is its own reward. So let me ask you again, if no one ever noticed your growth, would you still chase it? Would you still wake up early? Would you still sit in silence to reflect? Would you still protect your peace even if no one applauded? Because that's where real transformation begins, not when you're performing for the world, but when you're practicing for yourself. There's something sacred about doing the right thing when no one is watching. It means your growth is rooted in integrity, not ego. It means you're not chasing significance, you're choosing substance. And that's the kind of change that endures. So the next time you feel the urge to announce, to prove, to explain, pause. Ask yourself, am I doing this for me, or am I doing this to be seen? If it's truly for you, let it stay private. Let it grow quietly until one day, because the deepest transformations never need to shout, they just need to be lived. And that brings us to another truth most people overlook. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. In the next part, we'll explore why sharing too much with the wrong people can actually sabotage your growth, and how Stoic discretion protects your peace. Have you ever opened up to someone, shared something deeply personal, only to feel regret the moment the words left your mouth? Maybe they shrugged it off. Maybe they made a joke. Maybe they gave you a blank stare that made your vulnerability feel small. And in that moment, you learned a painful truth. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. Not everyone deserves access to your inner world. We live in a culture that celebrates openness. We're told sharing is healing, vulnerability is strength. And yes, there's truth in that, but only when you share with the right people. Because if you hand the map of your soul to someone who doesn't value it, they'll treat it like a crumpled receipt. Think about it. Some people, even people close to you, haven't done the work to listen deeply. And when you try harder to explain, when you keep repeating yourself, hoping they'll finally get it, you don't feel closer, you feel more alone. I once knew a young man who had just come out of therapy. He was finally finding clarity after years of inner chaos. One afternoon, he tried sharing a small piece of that healing journey with a few coworkers. To him, it was powerful. To them, it was nothing. One made a joke, another half smiled and changed the subject. None of them meant harm, but the message was clear. This wasn't the place. That moment didn't just silence him. It taught him something essential. Emotional depth requires the right container. If you pour it into the wrong one, it gets lost, or worse, dismissed. The Stoics would have nodded in agreement. Epictetus taught, if you want to grow, be prepared to be misunderstood. That's why discretion is not weakness, it's wisdom. Not everyone is capable of holding your truth without judgment. Not everyone is ready to walk with you through your healing. And that's okay. Your inner life is not public property. It's not a marketplace, and you are not obligated to explain your healing, your choices, or your emotional battles to anyone who hasn't earned your trust. Boundaries aren't walls, they're filters. You don't build them to push people away. You build them to protect what is still fragile, still growing inside you. Because if you overshare too soon, you risk exposing what isn't strong enough yet to survive criticism or indifference. So the next time you feel the urge to open up, am I sharing this because I trust this person, or because I don't want to carry this alone? If it's the latter, write it down. Sit with it. Let it breathe in silence first. Because the truth is, some people haven't earned the right to hold what's most sacred in you. And giving it away too freely isn't courage, it's self-sabotage. Protect your energy. Protect your growth. Not everyone needs to know what you're healing from. Not everyone can meet you where you are, and that's not a sign of weakness. That's a sign of wisdom. And here's the paradox. The moment you stop needing to be understood by everyone, you set yourself free. Free to keep growing without interruption. Free to choose peace over explanation. That kind of freedom doesn't come from exposure, it comes from discernment. And this leads us to one of the simplest, yet most powerful Stoic lessons. In the next part, we'll uncover why words without action are just noise, and why silent discipline builds the kind of respect that lasts far longer than any speech. Have you ever noticed how tiring it is to hear someone talk endlessly about what they're going to do, but then nothing changes? I'm starting my new diet tomorrow. I'll finally apply for that promotion next week. This year, I'm serious about changing. You've heard it before. Maybe you've even said it yourself. The problem isn't a lack of desire. The problem is that words without action lose power. Each unkept promise becomes lighter, emptier. Over time, no one, including yourself, believes the words anymore. That's why the Stoics valued silence paired with discipline. Because silence doesn't waste energy on explaining. Silence protects your focus, so you can use it where it matters on the work itself. Think of someone you respect deeply. Chances are it's not because of what they say they'll do, but because of what they've done. The quiet builder, the calm leader, the friend who doesn't talk about change but lives it, so you feel it in their presence. I once knew a man like this. He never announced his intentions. No new year, new me. No motivational speeches about what he was going to accomplish. But after a few months, everyone could see the difference. He moved with calm confidence. He listened before speaking. His words had weight because his life had discipline. And when I asked him what changed, he simply said, I stopped talking about it and started doing it. The Stoics lived this principle. Epictetus reminded his students, don't explain your philosophy, embody it. Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, never told the world he was working on himself. He quietly wrote in his journals, holding himself accountable to his values, day after day. His discipline wasn't loud, but it shaped the way he ruled. So let me ask you, because every moment you explain is energy that could be used to execute. Here's the truth. Actions outlast words. Speeches fade, promises fade, but consistent action builds something no one can take away. That's why the Stoic way is not about boasting, it's about building. Imagine your life as a foundation. Every quiet choice, every morning you wake up on time, every distraction you resist, every moment you choose discipline over impulse is like laying a brick. You don't invite the world to watch each brick go down. But over time, the wall stands strong. And this is where we need to take the lesson further. Because acting more and speaking less is not just about earning respect, it's about something deeper. It's about consistency. It's about inner freedom. The truth is, many people can act for a day or a week when they feel motivated. But only those who stay consistent in silence, who don't need applause to keep going, build real strength. That's the next step. So the question is not just, are you acting more than you're speaking? The question is, can you stay consistent in silence even when no one is watching? In the next part, we'll explore the hidden power of silent consistency and why it may be the most unshakable strength you'll ever build. Let me ask you something. What's harder, starting or staying consistent? The truth is, almost anyone can start. Anyone can get motivated for a week. Anyone can shout on January 1st, this year will be different. But very few can stay the course quietly, day after day, when no one is watching, when the applause fades, when the excitement dies. This is where real power is built. Not in the noise of a beginning, but in the quiet repetition of consistency. Think about it. The gym is always full in the first 2 weeks of the year. People flood in with new goals, new outfits, new energy. But by February, most are gone. Why? Because they needed the crowd. They needed the feeling of starting big, but they didn't know how to keep going in silence. The Stoics understood this long before modern self-help. They believed that greatness is not found in dramatic gestures. Marcus Aurelius wrote daily reminders to himself not to announce to the empire, but to keep his own soul steady. That's what consistency looks like. Doing the work whether anyone sees it or not. I once knew a woman who quietly transformed her life. No grand posts, no big declarations. She simply decided, every morning I will write 1 page in my journal. Every night I will put my phone down 1 hour before bed. Small things, but she did them every day for a year. By the end, she wasn't the same person. Her mind was calmer. Her sleep was deeper. Her decisions were clearer. And the best part? Hardly anyone noticed. Until suddenly, everyone did. Because that's the thing about silent consistency, it doesn't shout. But eventually, it becomes undeniable. Let me give you another picture. Imagine a tree growing. Nobody claps for the roots as they dig deeper. Nobody celebrates each millimeter of growth. But day after day, quietly, the tree strengthens itself underground. Then one day, it stands tall, unshakable in storms, offering shade and fruit. That's what your consistency is doing in silence, building roots so deep that life's storms can't shake you. So ask yourself, are you chasing big moments of motivation, or are you building small habits of discipline? Because motivation is a spark, but consistency is the fire. Motivation is loud, but consistency is silent. And silence always lasts longer than noise. The Stoic way is this: don't wait for someone to notice your efforts. Don't depend on recognition to keep you going. Let your discipline be its own reward. Because the person who keeps going when no one's watching becomes unstoppable when everyone finally notices. And here's the paradox. Silent consistency may feel invisible at first, but in time, it becomes the loudest thing about you. People will see it in your calm, in your strength, in the way you walk into a room with quiet confidence. You won't have to tell them who you are, they'll already know. So here's your challenge. Stop worrying about how loud your beginning is. Start focusing on how steady your steps are. One habit, done consistently, is worth more than 10 promises shouted loudly and abandoned quickly. Because the world doesn't remember what you said you'd do. It remembers what you kept doing long after the excitement wore off. But there's one more truth we need to uncover. Because when you learn to move in silence, you're no longer chained to the need for validation. In the next part, we'll explore how silence itself becomes the foundation of true inner freedom. What if I told you that silence isn't just about strength, it's about freedom? Because the moment you stop explaining yourself to everyone, the moment you stop needing the world to understand or approve of you, something powerful happens. You get your freedom back. Think about how many choices people make just to be seen a certain way. They post about their diet so others believe they're disciplined. They share their struggles so people think they're brave. They announce their achievements so no one thinks they're falling behind. But here's the truth. When you live for recognition, you live in a cage. A cage built out of opinions, out of expectations, out of applause. Silence breaks those chains, because silence says, I don't need your approval to keep going. I don't need your permission to heal. I don't need your applause to matter. The Stoics knew this kind of freedom. Epictetus, born a slave, realized that while his body could be controlled, his mind could not. Freedom, he taught, doesn't come from doing whatever you want, it comes from mastering yourself. Marcus Aurelius ruled the largest empire in the world, yet he wrote in his journal, "It never ceases to amaze me. We all love ourselves more than other people, but care more about their opinion than our own." He understood the chains of public approval, and he refused to let them rule him. Let me ask you, how many times have you silenced your true self because you were afraid of how people would react? How often have you reshaped your story just to make it more acceptable, more likable, more applause-worthy? And how much energy have you wasted trying to be understood by those who will never truly understand? True freedom begins the moment you stop handing out pieces of your soul for validation. The moment you stop needing to prove, to explain, to narrate your every move, because when you live that way, your peace is always in someone else's hands. I once knew a man who quietly rebuilt himself after years of failure. He didn't tell anyone his plan. He didn't need to. And because he didn't, no one could interrupt him with doubt, criticism, or empty praise. 6 months later, his life looked entirely different. He had built new habits, restored his health, strengthened his mind. When people asked how he did it, his answer was simple. I stopped telling everyone and started living for myself. That's freedom. Silence gives you back control over your own narrative. You're no longer reacting to every opinion, no longer chasing applause. Instead, you move with calm. You act with intention. You choose for yourself. And here's the beauty. When you no longer need to explain, you discover how much lighter life feels. You stop dragging the weight of other people's approval. You stop needing to justify your every step. You begin to live with clarity, not noise. So I'll ask you this final question. Are you living for freedom, or are you still living for applause? Because the two cannot coexist. If you choose applause, you'll always be chasing it. But if you choose silence, you'll find a freedom no one can give you and no one can take away. That's the ultimate Stoic lesson. Silence is not emptiness, it's presence. It's not weakness, it's wisdom. It's not fear, it's freedom. And that is the power of silence. Not the silence of suppression, but the silence of strength. Speak less, act more. Stay consistent in the quiet, and protect your inner world as if it were sacred, because it is. When you do, you won't just grow stronger, you'll grow freer, and the world will feel it, even if you never say a word. So what have we learned across this journey? We've seen how repeating your pain keeps you trapped inside it, how talking too soon about your goals steals the very energy you need to achieve them, how announcing every change turns growth into performance, and how oversharing your struggles can hand your power to people who don't deserve it. But we've also seen the other side, the strength of silence, the discipline of acting more and speaking less, the quiet force of consistency that builds roots no one can see until one day they hold you steady through any storm. And the greatest gift of all, silence is freedom, freedom from the cage of applause, the weight of opinions, the endless need to prove yourself. This is the Stoic way. Not hiding, not suppressing, but choosing carefully when to speak and living with such discipline that you don't need words to prove who you are. Because the truth is, people will feel your transformation long before they hear about it. So the challenge I leave with you is this. Stop narrating your every step. Stop handing away your story for validation. Build in silence, heal in silence, grow in silence, and let your life, not your words, carry the message. Because when you master the art of quiet transformation, you don't just gain respect, you gain peace, you gain strength, you gain freedom. Now I want to hear from you. What part of your life are you choosing to build quietly? What have you stopped sharing in order to protect your peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to read your stories. And if this message resonated with you, don't forget to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs it, and subscribe for more Stoic lessons every week. Together, we're building a community of calm, clarity, and inner strength. Stay strong, stay silent, and let your actions speak louder than your words.